So Arvind, it seems like every leader right now is saying they want to transform their organizations with AI. What separates the organizations that are effectively driving change versus the ones that aren't?
Yeah, one of the things that we have noticed that drives success is leaders who are focused on business outcomes and thinking about how AI can actually impact those core metrics that they have in the business, as opposed to just like, hey, just use more and more AI in the enterprise. And also like leaders who are sort of fundamentally thinking about AI as a core part of their strategy.
Bob, that's definitely something we've seen in our conversations with leaders recently. You know, it needs to be a commitment. What else have you seen in terms of the leaders that effectively are driving change?
Well, the main thing I've seen is spending the last few months with you doing all sorts of interviews to develop this list of 100 sort of ways that AI might transform work. But one of the things that really has, I think, struck both of us is this notion that when leaders see things in terms of black and white, all expertise, all novices, all centralization, all decentralization, whatever, those are the ones I worry about. The ones that seem to be doing the best are the ones who are navigating these tensions and trade-offs in an evidence-based and curious way.
Another tension that we uncovered in the report in our conversations was around speed and fast and slow. How, there's a lot of pressure right now to move quickly with AI. When do you move quickly versus when do you slow down? Bob, this is something you've studied in. So
too much. The best I can do now for organizations is to use a race car analogy. Mm-hmm. Which is that if you just go pedal to the metal the whole time, you're just going to smash into the wall. But the way to go fastest down the straightaway is to know when to brake so you can make it out of the turn, know when to pit stop, and when the car blows up, it's time to leave the racetrack. And in some ways, I think that analogy works in the companies I've seen over the years, not just in AI, but the ones that know when to sort of slow down and to figure out what's going on and what needs to be fixed. But when they know what to do, then it's let's shut up and put pedal to the metal and not argue about what we're going to do.
Arvind, one way that organizations are trying to de-risk AI implementation and perhaps go fast is through pilots and POCs.
Yeah.
What's your viewpoint on when, if any, situations in terms of when pilots work versus when they tend not to work effectively?
If you look at the last 2 years, enterprises, they did a lot of POCs, a lot of pilots. And many times they didn't even have a clear reason for why they were doing it. It was more like, well, this looks like a cool capability. Let's go and see, how well it works in my enterprise. And you're not yet tied them to, what are my key business priorities? What are the metrics that I'm trying to actually move? And therefore, should I actually be more careful in terms of what projects I should be really starting. So what I feel, is the right approach is first, think about not doing 100 projects at the same time. Pick the 5 most important ones across your enterprise. And they have to be, associated with what are your top business priorities. And then instead of having the mindset of that, hey, I'm just trying this experiment or a POC, you start with the intent of that I'm actually going to build something in production. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've observed, sometimes, you start these POCs and you don't have your teams really bought in. For example, many of these AI capabilities that you're trying to bring, they actually, they're hungry for data. They need to actually connect with your internal systems, understand your business, and then try to actually do something, with AI to automate those business processes. But if you have these POCs and you're not really bought in, sometimes you've seen customers will say that, hey, well, let's do this POC. We don't have to connect it with our real systems. Let's just connect it with some test data and see what happens. And that's sort of all signs of that, look, you don't have the right teams bought in. You don't have the business behind you. And, the POC ends and you sort of are left with should we do it? Should we not do it? So those are some of the things which I would say, try to stay away from and start again with what are the top 5 things, for our company and get that support from the beginning.
So the second tension we see in this report is between centralization and decentralization. This question of where should AI live in your organization? Should it be centralized in a center of excellence, or should it be pushed more to individual teams to manage and oversee? And in many cases, it's a hybrid. Yeah. Bob, How do leaders think about this trade-off between centralization?
Well, people have been arguing whether centralization is best. And there's people who want authority and want to be in charge. And then there's the people who want freedom and everybody should be able to do whatever they want. And that argument has always really annoyed me because it is a classic case of, well, it depends on what you're talking about. If you want to have risk mitigation or you want customers, for example, to have a consistent experience, I'm sorry, you need standardization and you need centralization to make sure it's sort of the same. They don't let you do whatever you want when you run a McDonald's, just for example. My favorite current employee benefit, the AI playground, it's got virtually every major AI tool, and they keep upgrading it. And they encourage all employees to use it and figure out and students, anybody else, to use it in their jobs to try to figure out how to use it.
Just as the org structure, you sort of need to think about that balance. In technology, you do as well, right? You need a central source to understand that, everyone's following standards, it's secure, responsible, but you also need to give teams the flexibility to be able to develop those workflows.
Well, ultimately, AI, is better be a core part of every business process in every single department in your enterprise. If it is not, then you're not leveraging the technology as you should. So it has to be, and to make that happen, it has to be decentralized in some way. Like, every department has to sort of think, AI native.
Yes.
And but the problem is that right now, first, everybody's busy and they don't have time to figure out what AI can do for them. There's a lot of education that needs to happen. And so it does make sense, in my opinion, when you have a centralized team, it can actually serve the purpose of ensuring that progress is happening. They're not responsible for anything other than making AI work in your enterprise. So that focus helps, them not only bring the consistency, as you said, of using AI the right way across all the different departments with the right security, with the right governance, but also they just push it. They push, they drive education.
Yes.
They help every team understand the power of AI. And in fact, if they don't make progress, they're going to be trouble. So I think that actually was also important because all the other functions, they got their core function and AI is just only an additional thing. But for the centralized AI team, they're fully measured on success with AI.
And then the last tension we unpack is top-down versus bottom-up change, right? We know that absolutely you need top-down change in organizations, you need policy principles, but you also need bottom-up change, and everyone needs to be using the technology to see real change. Bob, how do leaders think about this balance between top-down change, bottom-up change?
Well, there's always arguments about what's better, and I hate to be a boring academic, but to say yes, when we see system-wide changes happen in organizations, first of all, it's the leader's job to make the decision. You got to reinforce it. You got to provide the resources, and you have to stop doing things so people can focus. And it's a weird analogy, but we just did a case study of transformation at the Department of Motor Vehicles in the state of California, which it doesn't seem related, but there's this guy, Steve Gordon, who is a tech executive who did it, and his team made all these top-down changes and rules and allocated budget for digital transformation and all over the place. But then he visited all 180 field offices and collected ideas and encouraged people to come up with solutions that were then spread throughout. And I thought that was a great example because he and his team made a lot of authority-based decisions, but then they went sort of bottom-up to collect ideas and to do some local prototyping too.
So Arvind, when we think about bottom-up change, how do you as a leader think about activating bottom-up change and ensuring that everyone within your organization is able to use these technologies and use them effectively?
So the real impact in the enterprise happens when everybody in the company is adopting the new technology. And so you need to drive the adoption of the new technology. AI has to come to people. It's better to embed agents also in your workflows. So as opposed to thinking that, I do some type of work and I'm going to actually invoke an agent to do it. It should become natural. I'm in the system where I do that work and the agent sort of automatically comes in and adds value to me there.
So that's a really interesting tool to me because it's a standardized tool that enables hyper-localization all at once. So, and it's also woven into the nature of the work that they're doing.
Exactly.
It's not a separate thing. So those to me are two hallmarks of things that actually stick. as opposed to this thing you do off to the side that isn't really my work.
A lot of these tensions fundamentally come down to leadership, right? How do you lead your organization through this type of change?
Yeah.
Arvind, I've heard you say that AI has changed how you lead, how you manage.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
I just keep asking questions. I don't stop. And like, and these questions actually have a cost. Like, and I work with my direct team and I ask them a question, they take it seriously. Like I was not really like thinking that seriously when I actually pose a question. But then sometimes, people do 2 weeks of work to actually answer that question, which I was, was just a curiosity that I had. So for me, but it's important, I need to understand how a business is doing. So I still have those questions. And what AI is now helping me with is it becomes, that first stop, like for any question that I have. And I go and I can ask, arbitrarily complex questions here. For example, how is this part of our business, doing right now? What are the key risks, that we have, for our engineering team? Or like, I'll go and ask AI that, hey, go do some research on the web and tell us like, some new things, that we should be building. So these are all like, complex questions that sometimes, I would ask our chief product officer or our chief technology officer, and I consume a lot of time for them. But now I'm self-serving myself. That's one big change for me. Like, when you can bring all the knowledge in the world, all the knowledge inside your company, and like, with that amazing reasoning and thinking capabilities that these models have, it's sort of like, I have these infinite set of like, amazing teammates, that are very knowledgeable. And I would rather first go to them because, it doesn't take, that valuable time away from the rest of my team.
The other thing that I think is even, I think about what's really important in the age of AI that's always been important, but even more important is because there's just so much noise. And this is one of the main things that almost comes out of our report. There's inconsistency in noise. Like, what's our strategy?
Yeah.
What do we do? Is AI good or bad? So to me, it's in it. You talk about the importance of having strategic intent, know what your strategy is.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, especially as organizations get larger and more complex, there's all this evidence that leaders have to say fewer things and have to say them over and over again.
Yeah.
It's even more important now, so people know what to focus on and what to ignore, because it's one of the noisiest times I've ever seen in business, and I've been watching businesses for a long time. Yeah. And so when you're pretty sure you have the right strategy and the right work practices, say the same thing over and over again, no matter how bored you get as a senior leader. I think that's really important right now.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Arvind, Bob, thank you so much.